We're not supposed to dwell on the past. We're not supposed to get caught up in the former things. And keep in mind that God is doing a new thing. And along with that, dwelling in the past, the title of this message, and it could be sort of a series of some sort, is Don't Lose Heart. In Ephesians chapter 3, verse 13, it says, I asked you not to be discouraged. That's our main verse. Paul is saying he's in prison. And these are the prison epistles. Paul in Ephesians and the Philippians and Colossians and Philemon, those are the prison epistles that Paul wrote when he was in prison. Here he is in Ephesians chapter 3 where he says, don't be discouraged. And while Paul's in prison, he got there because he didn't do anything wrong. He was only preaching the gospel. And he was thrown in jail for that reason. But in prison, he didn't feel as if he was a prisoner. Because the very first thing Paul says while he's there is that I am a prisoner of Christ. He didn't look at himself as a prisoner to a situation or circumstances. He wasn't a prisoner of Rome, even though he was. He said, I'm a prisoner of Jesus Christ. And he wasn't a prisoner to his failures or regrets and things that happened to the past. He was a prisoner of Christ. And what does that mean? He's saying, Jesus has totally captivated me. He has totally captured my attention. He's totally captured my heart and my mind. And other places it says that Paul was a bond servant, which we probably all know what that means from maybe a message before. But a bond servant is what Paul considered himself to be. And that is somebody that willfully desires to be a prisoner or like a slave, or to be obedient and to be faithful and true to somebody else. And so he considered himself willfully wanting to serve God wholeheartedly with no regrets and holding nothing back. A bond servant. So he didn't look at himself while he was in prison as if that he was in bondage. He was a bond servant. I'm not a prisoner of Rome, my past, my failures. I'm a prisoner of Christ. He has control of my life. You know, we can feel stuck at times, and we can feel that we're put on hold, or our life has been put on pause, and that the world is just sort of flashing by us, and we're like standing in place, and we see everything moving in a slow motion, and we're not quite like in sync with what's happening, and we get these feelings that it's passing us by. But Paul, he never felt like he was on hold when he was in prison. And by the way, he talks about himself being, as Nancy mentioned, part of the message, he was in chains. Not only in prison, but he was chained. But Paul knew, and this is true for us too, that God was still writing his story. His story was not finished, even though he was in prison. And God is still writing your story, and God is still writing my story. God is still writing your children's story. He hasn't finished the book, or he hasn't finished the chapter. And in my mind, if he's finished the chapter, he's working on the book. And if you're getting to the book, he's got another book. It never ends. It's not finished. It's ongoing. He doesn't waste anything that's come across our path, or that's come into our life. Nothing is wasted. Not one thing by God. Nothing happens in our life just by happen chance. You know, Paul being a prisoner, he was there by his own choice. We make decisions sometimes that are putting us in the position that we're in, and that imprisons us because of what we've done. But it doesn't matter if it was our decision or if it was in the will of God. If we made a mistake, God will not waste it, and you're still not out of what God has planned for you. There's nothing wasted, even when you make a wrong decision. In the beginning of Ephesians 1 through 10, it says that Paul was talking about the goodness of God, in the riches of Jesus Christ. And then it jumps into verse 3, chapter 13, and that's the opening verse, and he says, I ask you not to be discouraged because of my sufferings for you were for your glory. Don't be discouraged because I'm in chains, because the chains that I'm in is going to produce something good for me, Paul, that he's anticipating, and something good for those around him for their glory. So chains sometimes are not necessarily the worst thing in the world that can happen to you. Making a bad decision, getting caught in a matter where you think your life is sort of now tripped up, you don't have a future because of things that have happened, it's not saying that you don't have a future. There's glory coming, and God is at work. He's doing things behind the scene that we don't see. They saw Paul as if he was imprisoned because they're looking with their natural eye. But Paul was not imprisoned. He was free, a prisoner of Christ. God is doing something that we cannot see when we're in those situations. God is sovereign, and everything is under control, even when you feel the bottom is dropping out. You know, you may feel imprisoned by finances, by relationships, by circumstances, by wrong decisions, by regrets. We talked about that. If only I would have done it differently. By regrets, things that have happened to you. Those type of chains do not cancel out your future. Even if, and this is Claudia's statement here. I told her a little bit about what I'm going to talk on, and she says, even if there are consequences of our own choice. I thought that was nice, so I put it in there for everybody. Even if the consequences of our own choice, and we sort of painted ourselves in a corner, you're not beyond the reach of God, and you're not in a situation where your dreams and your hopes and your desires and the things that you would hope and are hoping for to happen are not going to happen. It just so happens that God can use your condition, the state you're in, to bring about those ambitions, those desires, those hopes that you still have in your heart. And you'll use it, and He won't waste it. So catch this. You're not bound by your past. Paul's chains, and Nancy mentioned this morning, it was because of Paul in Ephesus, in that moment when he was chained, that the gospel actually spread to Ephesus, which was the Gentile nations, and eventually came to us. So this very moment that Paul is there in prison, God had us in mind. His chains in prison reached beyond further than whatever he thought could be accomplished in his life, and it reached us even today through the gospel. So you can be chained, but you're still chosen. What looks like, and I don't mean this as a quaint little verse, or a little, slogan, but it is really true. What looks like could be a setback can actually be a set up, a stage that God is beginning to set before you to open the next door, to take you out of the past or those places that maybe there are hurts and pains. And when God has a purpose for you, which He does in your life, it's clearer. It doesn't matter if you've hit rock bottom and you can't even see over the curb. His callings and His gifts are irrevocable. That means what God has planned for you is always on the table. It never goes away. No matter what bottom you've hit, or what difficulties or what chains you may feel that are holding you back, He still has that purpose, that thing that He has for you, that He wants to accomplish through you and give you a life and heal the hurts in the past and lift you up and put you back on your feet with a joy in your heart and a praise on your mouth and going forward in a way that you've never have before. And he'll use those things. Everything along the way is part of God's plan. We look at it as sometimes, and I don't think we should overemphasize this way, sometimes we say if it's bad, it's from the devil. If it's good, it's from God. It's that simple. Well, okay, maybe the devil intended it to be bad. It didn't come from God, but God knows how. In Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11, and this is Paul also in prison, he says, according to God's purpose, he works all things according to the counsel of his will. Did you catch that? All things, everything. The things that we think that have just totally devastated us, that we'll never get back on our feet, be able to go forward again. He's working all things to the counsel of his will. He's not going to waste anything. Everything that comes into your life has been filtered through the hands of God. And those things that hold us down, that make us feel as if we can't get back up, he knows how to work those into his purpose and plan that's designed specifically for your life. And he says the gifts and calling. We have gifts that he's enabled you with that you can do and accomplish the things that he has for us to do. And it's not necessarily always in a selfish way, but also for a way in such that we can enjoy life, that you're beginning to get blessed financially, that your kids are starting to get their lives in order. Peace is coming to your home. There's not as much chaos. And he can work all things for good. And he will. In Romans 11:29, the gifts, as we mentioned, they're irrevocable. That means that they're there. There's something that God has given that he will not take back. And at any time along our course, we can tap into that and be a part of God's perfect plan for our lives. Now, he does enable, and it will happen, and regardless of the chains that we may feel that we're caught up in that is holding us back. In fact, those chains could be a number of things, as we talked about. And they can be emotional too, like depression and anxiety. And God is about restoring. He's about loosening us, setting us free, removing those chains so that we can live the fulfilled life that he has for us in him. That thing that you think that may have finished you, the one thing that happened that you think that may have knocked you out, the thing that you think that might have taken you out of the game, is actually the very thing that God can use to be your greatest strength. Your greatest weakness with God can turn into your greatest strength. You might be hurt so bad that you're unable to love people. You've been rejected. You're in a marriage, and you're very sensitive about everything. And he can take that heart of yours that might be stony and cold, which is your weakness, and he can make it your strength and make you the most loving and caring and compassionate person. You might be always in a state of, you can't understand why, but you feel like a little cloud is on me. It doesn't want to lift. He can take that little cloud and he can turn it into your greatest strength, where that sadness will turn into joy and gladness and happiness. You could be broke. I was broke, really broke. I don't think you could have been more broke than what I was. And God took my broke financial situation, and I don't know how he did it, but in a short time, he put me on my feet, blessed me, prospered me, given me a security in my finances to be able to, support a family, send kids to school, and I never dreamed any of that would be possible. And you could be anxious or fearful. You might not have peace, but he can give you peace and a freedom of mind and courage and strength that you've never had before. So he's in the business of loosening chains and taking our very weaknesses and making them our strength. And God is still at work today doing those things. And God is working. And when your life doesn't look like what you prayed for, don't lose heart. When your timeline doesn't meet your expectations, don't lose heart. When you feel stuck dwelling on the past, don't lose heart. If you know the verse, Romans 8:28, God is working all things, remember, over in Ephesians, all things according to his will and purpose and plan, he works all things. And then for the believer, he's working all things for the believer for their good. So God is doing about two things there. He's working everything in line with his perfect will and plan, and everything that comes into your life, he's working it out for you, for your good. In a sense, what he's doing is he's putting us on the right path. And he's allowing us to let go of those things that have always held us down from really feeling freedom that we have in Jesus. There's a story, you know it, I'll be getting to it here soon, but as some examples, you've got Joseph. You know the verse. He said, you intended it for evil, but God intended it for good. And the whole point here is if anybody's out there and something's happened to you and you feel like you've just been put on the shelf or your bottom has dropped out or your earth is shook just a little bit, rest assured that nothing shakes God. And these chains can be the very thing that will catapult your situation into where God wants it to be. Not that he ordered the chains, but like with Paul, the chains produced progress. It produced a future. So with that in mind, we look at 2 Corinthians, and it actually says, do not lose heart. This momentary trouble that you're going through is achieving. See, troubles, they're achieving. We don't order them, we don't want them. Sometimes they come on our own free will and our choices. Regardless of what's happening, they're achieving something in your life. And they did so with Paul as an example. And don't look at, and it says in Corinthians, don't look at what is seen, but look at the unseen. Keep in mind, God is moving. He's at work. And I have an example of that. And I saw this and I thought, I've got to put this in the message. And you know the story, but I want to point out just a couple of little things, and I know it'll probably make the point here very well. Abraham, he had Isaac, and Isaac was not married. But around Isaac were only Canaanite women. And Abraham didn't want these, that intermarriage to happen. And Isaac wanted a wife. So what does he do? Abraham, he calls his servant and he says, go back to my homeland and find a wife for Isaac. You know the story, right? And I know you do. So anyways, so the servant, and he must have been a terrific, humble kind of servant, totally loyal. Because everywhere you read, he's saying, I want to make sure my master gets the wife that God has for him. I want to make sure that we pick the right woman that is willing to come back with me. And he's very concerned, and he's praying all the time. And when he gets there, he's at the water trough where they water all the animals. And it's also the place where women would come from the village, and they would fill up their water pots and go back. And so he's there, and he sees the different young women and the animals, and he really doesn't know what to do. And it's interesting that, again, he prays, and he bows his head, and he says, Lord, and he comes up with a plan, and he's praying, and as he's praying, he doesn't even get the words out of his mouth. And as soon as he lifts up his eyes, guess who's walking right towards him before he actually finishes his prayer? Rebecca. Isaac's future wife. So what does that tell you? It tells you that God is going ahead of you. And why is he going ahead of you? Because he said, I will send anybody know what? An angel before you. I will send an angel before you, to the servant. So God is supernaturally working. He knows the condition we're in. He knows that he can work all things out for you, even if you've made the wrong decisions. And he's going to put a purpose in your life where you have gifts to enable you, to empower you, and he's going to give you that purpose that only we can really feel, where we're actually enjoying our faith and our walk with God. And that's what he wants to do, and he's headed in that direction. You know, as we look a little further, Rebecca was chosen by an angel, and he has something that you're praying for right now on the way. It's coming. And he's not only going before you, he's supernaturally putting things together so that when you arrive, like that servant did, and you haven't even finished praying what you're praying about, God has already answered it. And that's how he's working. And he will work. And what he's doing for us. The angel went before him to prepare the way. And so don't lose heart. God is preparing your way too. He's working. He's going ahead of us. We need to keep believing when our faith is under pressure. And you'll find that your story is not finished. My story is not finished. This church is not finished. Your children's, their story is not finished. Regardless of what's come their way. The key is, how do you respond in a situation like that? Do you curse God? Like Job's wife said, curse God and die? Or do you write it out like Joseph, or like Job to the end? And see what the final chapter in the book says. And he's still writing your story. Now, one other part that plays into this as well, and I'll just touch on it quickly, is remember Joseph in prison. And when he was there in prison, he actually said that he was in a God-forsaken place. And when that cupbearer who was imprisoned, that was along with Joseph, and Joseph told him that God had a good future for him, and he was delivered from that prison and taken out of the prison, the cupbearer. But Joseph was left behind. He almost begged the cupbearer to put in a good word for me in this God-forsaken place. What does that mean? Joseph was in the kind of the deepest of deepest parts of the prison. He wasn't just in prison, he was in the depths of the prison. And that tells me that we can at times feel that heaviness, that emotion, those anxieties, and they come and go, but those are chains. And God is in the business of removing the chains. And he's in the business of restoration. He's in the business of taking away those things that we've been dealing with so long, whether it could be, you're angry at an ex for some reason and you can't get over it, or, I lost a child. I know Cindy lost a child. Those are deep, 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 deep feelings that just don't go away with a little poof. But God wants to restore and make whole what he does. We can't forget the past, even though he says forget the former things. We don't totally, even though God with Joseph said, he caused me to forget all my troubles. And he can do that. But also, we're supposed to try to forget former things. But do we actually forget? We get to a place where they don't have the effect on you that they used to. And you see them in a different light, in a different perspective. And that's called restoration. So the last thing in closing that I'd like to mention is that Paul's attitude. And this to me is really how God works, his key to blessing. This is really where I think what God's all about. God's all about ministering to us. He's all about meeting our needs. He's all about healing relationships. He's all about making us whole. He's all about taking our lives and making them into something that we could have never done on our own. He's about all those things and more. But, like Paul said, yes, God's all about these things in my life. He's taking care of me. Don't worry about me. I'm not a prisoner of Rome. I'm a prisoner of Jesus Christ. He was in a place with an attitude knowing that whatever God does for me, whatever he does to bless me is going to spill over and it's going to affect somebody else. So if we keep in mind that we are a walking testimony, that God will move heaven and earth to reach us, to meet our needs, to take us to places that we've never been, to heal, restore, prosper, bless, in ways that we can't even imagine. But along the way, Paul said, for the glory of God. If we can be there to say, look what God has done in my life. People are watching. They see you. They know what's going on. They know what pushes your buttons. They know the struggles you go through. They know if you're in chains at the moment. It's how you respond when you're in those situations that people see. And when they see you come through it, they're going to know and see that God is real in your life. And those are the times that if you really want to be blessed, if you really want to see your finances get in order, tell God that, Lord, bless me so much I can give $1 million to the church. And if you really mean it, and you can handle that type of faith, and obviously I'm being kind of way over the top here to make an example, God likes that kind of attitude. That's Paul's attitude. You're not in it just for yourself. You're in it, sure, so that things happen in your own life, but you want to give God the glory so people see what God has done. And that you have a testimony, something you can share with somebody else. And that's the part, the follow-through, that will really get God's hand of blessing on our life. And with that, if you're watching today and you're in a spot where you just feel like that Joseph in prison, and you're at the bottom of the bottom, and you're crying out that this is a God-forsaken place, and how did I ever get here? I did everything right. I didn't do anything wrong. Why is my life turning out this way? Why am I in chains? Because God wants to take those chains in your life and point you to Jesus. Because he's the only one that can loosen those chains and give you a life beyond what you ever thought possible. And he can do that, and he will, just by asking Jesus to come into your heart and life. Amen? Amen.